So now we are recording. The second announcement I have to make is that given the high number of participants in the call today, and I see we have so far 123 people who joined the call, we decided to mute all microphones. Therefore, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to share, please make use of the chat. Ahmed Faras, who is also one of the co-chairs of the working group, will monitor the chat throughout the webinar and will make sure that as many questions as possible will be replied by our panelists. The last announcement actually leads me to our agenda. If the slide changes, there it is. So the online event is scheduled for 90 minutes. After presenting the organizational information and the agenda to you, Guglielmo Skinina, who is the head of IOM's Mental Health, Psychosocial Response and Intercultural Communication section, will welcome you and briefly give an overview of the activities of the Men and Boys Working Group so far, and also explain why the topic MHPSS for Men and Boys is so relevant. Afterwards, we'll get to know 3 very interesting initiatives working with men and boys in different contexts. And we are very glad and thankful that we can welcome Naomi Whitney-Hirschmann from IOM Germany, Sharon Rose Ataget from the Jesuit Refugee Service in South Sudan, and Yevgenia Yurchuk from IOM Ukraine, who will share insights and experiences from their respective projects. Naomi will focus on psychosocial support self-help tools for Syrian men in Germany. Sharon will then talk about engaging men in MHPSS services in Maban, South Sudan, and Yevgenia will focus on a public campaign raising awareness on MHPSS and existing MHPSS services in Ukraine, specifically addressing men and boys. So we are very glad to have the colleagues in the call and sharing their interesting experiences with us. After each presentation, the respective panelists will reply to 2 questions from the chat. And after having finished, we'll also have additional time to discuss more questions that may also be relevant across projects. So we do this just to make sure that we have enough time for all the panelists to present their projects and their initiatives, and we'll have enough time for question and answers afterwards. At the end of the session, we will then finalize with an announcement. More on this then in 90 minutes. And now, without losing more time, I welcome Guglielmo Skinina, who will give a brief introductory speech.
Thank you so much, Andreas, and good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. As Andreas said, my name is Guglielmo Skinina, and I'm the head of the IOM Global Mental Health and Psychosocial Support section. I've been asked by Andreas and other colleagues who are active members of the Interagency Standing Committee Working Group on MHPSS for Men and Boys to give a short introduction to today's webinar. I don't know why, maybe because I was originally a strong promoter and actually for many years in the Interagency Standing Committee sector, the only promoter of this group that was finally established in 2018 and count among its members the Jesuit Refugee Service, War Child Holland, UNICEF, UNHCR, the Psychosocial Training Institute in Cairo, the International Medical Corps, and my own organization, IOM. So far, the work of the group has consisted in an analysis of existing literature and in an attempt to identify best practices through webinars and other exchanges, And all this work has shown that there is a gap in research and in programming when it comes to MHPSS for men and boys. And yet, the specific vulnerabilities of men and boys should be acknowledged and addressed if we want to achieve well-being for all in families and communities. Because there are some very important issues to notice. The first one is that men and boys are very often underrepresented as participants in community psychosocial support and counseling services. This is not only in emergency, it's also in normal situations, let's say, in Western countries where these services are available, but they are overrepresented among recipients of specialized mental health care, especially the ones that is administered in an emergency fashion. This call for action, because it means that men basically disregard their emotional and psychological needs till it is too late, till basically the needs became of pathological and clinical nature. The majority of people who commit suicide in the world are men. The worldwide percentage is 1.8, so almost double than women. And this become extremely higher in the West, where it is up to 4 times, in many countries. Is it true that the women attempt more suicide? But basically, people who die of suicide are, for the vast majority, men. And as you probably know, suicide and the number and reduction of suicide is basically the only mental health indicator in the Development Sustainable Goal Agenda 2030. There are harmful perceptions of masculinity around the globe, and these include the belief that men must be strong, and they are less vulnerable, or they should be less vulnerable than women and girls, especially in relation to emotional issues. These, together with cultural genderized norms, make it very difficult for men and boys to seek proactively for support. And I don't mean only, let's say, in the health sector or formal support, but even in its most informal forms, like peer-to-peer support, or talking with friends about feelings, and so on and so forth. It also has to be noted that I was talking before about all the community, because lack of psychosocial support for men is associated with harmful practices of men. Binge drinking is one of them, use of substance abuse is another, but also perpetrating bullying and violence against women and girls, but also against the entire society and between themselves, and depression are highly associated with lack of psychosocial support at the right time. To respond a bit to these issues, as I said, there is little research, there are little best practices. In October 2020, so 1 year ago, this working group organized a webinar with the presence of professionals that are actually making a difference in this domain in their respective organization and geographical areas. So Gary Berker from Promundo, Warren Spielberg, who is a psychoanalyst that has a professor at the New School, that has actually studied a lot the phenomenon of help-seeking behavior about mental health among African American communities. And then there was also Bassam Marshoud, from specialist of the Danish Red Cross, working in Gaza in one of the most interesting, I think, programs for men and boys, in Gaza, where concepts that are more related with masculinity, like the one of resistance, take the place, let's say, of concepts like resilience. And this has been a turning point in buying, basically, men into the program. What happened after that webinar? There has been some more research, done by the group. Someone attempted to identify best practices, also maybe to come out with a guidance note, but mainly we wanted to consolidate what has been done, so far with this webinar today, which presents interesting programs that were all implemented after the webinar took place, and that can give food for thoughts to the numerous participants to this webinar, because that's also an indicative information. We are very tired of webinars. No one is attending webinars anymore, yet, today, with not a very massive campaign, there are 150 of us, following the webinar, which means that there is a need, and there is a need for information in this respect. Andreas already introduced it. There are 80 minutes, I think, more or less left, in this webinar, and we will hear the experiences of colleagues from the Jesuit Refugee Service in South Sudan and my IOM colleagues, the psychosocial teams in the field, that work in providing psychosocial support to conflict-affected refugees and internally displaced men and boys in Germany and Ukraine, respectively. I wish you all interesting insight and fruitful exchanges after the presentation, and hope that this webinar can be a next step in advancing a very much needed debate on MHPSS for men and boys, or at least inclusion of men and boys in existing MHPSS programming. This is everything from my side, and Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Guli, for this interesting overview that you shared of the recent activities, and highlighting again the importance of more research, more projects addressing the psychosocial needs of men and boys. So thank you very much for this nice introduction. And I would then hand over to Naomi Whitney-Hirschmann, who works with the MHPSS program of IOM in Germany. And Naomi will present a very interesting process of developing self-help tools for Syrian men in Germany. And by saying this, Naomi, please feel free. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Andreas, and hello, everyone. Greetings from Berlin. I'm grateful to be here with you today and to represent the MHPSS team of IOM Germany, including our team leader, Amira Baya, who unfortunately could not be here. And I'm excited to present to you today our project, Psychosocial Support Self-Help Tools for Syrian Men in Germany, to give you a bit of an overview about the project's objectives, methods, and outputs, and hopefully provide some insight into how we included the experiences of Syrian men in our approach. Next slide, please. So this is a pattern that will be familiar to you who work in the field, and that also Guli touched upon in his introduction. There's this mutually reinforcing tension between a lack of available and accessible services for migrant men, which manifests itself, for example, in a lack of inclusion of men in MHPSS programming, and also a lack of, for example, counseling in the migrant's native language. On the other hand, there's a tendency among migrant men in general, but also migrant men, to not seek support. This can be due to a number of factors, including stigmatization of seeking help in the culture in which they were raised, and also a lack of information about what resources are available to them in their country of arrival. And it's important to note that while all these patterns are observable across geography, culture, etc., they often take very specific forms, depending, for example, on the economic, political, and legal situations in which the men find themselves after they have arrived, and also, of course, the historical development of gender roles in the communities in which they grew up. So all of this is at play when it comes to Syrian men in Germany, and a distinct lack of MHPSS exists, despite the fact that Syrian men represent the largest group of refugees in Germany and are likely to stay here for the long term. Next slide, please. So our project came out of a working group that was initiated at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, in which we were asking ourselves how we can best protect and serve migrants living in Germany in the face of a global pandemic. It also builds strongly on IOM's previous experience in providing MHPSS for men and boys who face crisis and displacement, including this self-help booklet, which was developed by IOM in Lebanon and Syria and was published in 2015. We adapted this project to the German context in acknowledgement of the fact that men faced a distinct set of challenges after they have arrived in Germany, and we adapted our methodology accordingly. Next slide, please. So in seeking to fill the gap or contribute to filling the gap for MHPSS for men and boys, we knew that we had to put the experiences and perspectives of Syrian men in Germany at the center of our work. Our goal is to create an accessible set of resources that are tailored to the needs of Syrian men in Germany, and which also build upon the resiliences and resources that are already at hand. Next slide, please. I think this is the previous slide. Yes, thank you. So the project was initiated in August 2020 and wrapped up just about a month ago. As you can see from this not entirely linear timeline, we encountered many challenges and delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic, including the fact that Germany increased contact restrictions in November 2020 and again in December 2020, which necessitated that our methodology be redeveloped to move to an online setting. In the following slides, I'd like to talk a bit more about our methodology, our data collection, and present the tools which we created. Next slide, please. So the methodology that we ended up going with was entirely virtual, as I mentioned, and included both individual interviews and focus group discussions, which took place in Arabic. These conversations with the participants were based around this idea of flowers and stones, flowers representing positive, happy experiences that the participants had had since coming to Germany, and stones representing challenging or distressing circumstances in which they might have found themselves. We then went on to discuss with participants what strategies they used when faced with these challenges, and discussed both helpful and unhelpful strategies that they had used. Next slide, please. Just a bit more insight into the participants that we had this conversation with. So the Syrian diaspora in Germany is, of course, a large and diverse group, and we sought to reflect that diversity in recruiting our participants. So we had 47 individuals, which included 13 women, because we thought that these women would have insight into the experiences of Syrian men in Germany based on their relationships with them as mothers, sisters, wives, fellow community members, etc. We had a diversity of age and family status, and we also were able to include individuals from the LGBTQ community, as well as the Kurdish ethnic minority from Syria. Next slide, please. And just a bit more information about our participants. They reflected a diverse geography, both in terms of where in Syria they originated and where in Berlin they are currently living. This geographic diversity in Germany was actually a positive effect of our move to a virtual methodology, because had this not been the case, we would have been limited to individuals we could meet in person in the Berlin area. Next slide, please. So on the basis of the interviews and focus group discussions, we developed a handbook for self-care for Syrian men living in Germany. As you can see, it's available in 3 languages, and I'll have more information at the end about how you can access it. But in the meantime, on the next slide, please. Just like to give you an overview about the contents of the handbook, which is all, again, based on the interviews and focus group discussions we did with Syrian men and their families. So in the first chapters, we acknowledge the challenging circumstances that Syrian men face in Germany. Our goal is to normalize feelings and emotions and provide some guidelines as to how one can come to understand them, which is of course important if one's been socialized to not feel, or to, if one expects that feelings are not something that one should have. We have chapters that go into identifying problematic coping strategies, and we encourage the reader to seek help from friends, family, to share their experiences with their community, and also to seek professional support if that is necessary. In the next chapters, we provide some suggestions about how the reader can identify their own personal strengths and resources and develop healthy coping strategies. We are very careful to avoid being prescriptive here, and we emphasize that the individual is the best qualified person to describe their own experiences and what resources and support kinds they would need. In the next chapters, we go into several themes that came up repeatedly in interviews and focus group discussions, which notably can be both sources of stress and also resources. For example, family connections can be a source of stress in situations where changing family roles might be upsetting for men who were raised to expect, for example, that they would be the sole breadwinner in their family, and then they find themselves in a position in Germany where they're unable to do that. That can, of course, be a source of psychosocial distress, but on the other hand, family is, of course, one of the most important sources of comfort, of encouragement, etc. So for all of these categories, we talk about the ways in which they can be both. And the book concludes with some exercises for goal setting and self-reflection, as well as directions for how to access the website and other resources. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show some of the illustrations from the handbook. These are both from earlier on in the handbook, chapters 2 and 4, respectively, which talk about normalizing emotions, understanding the reactions that one is having in your mind and your body to the circumstances around you. Next slide, please. And these are illustrations from later in the handbook where we talk about themes that can be both sources of distress and of resilience. Next slide, please. So this handbook and all other resources are available on our website, selfcare-germany.iom.imt. I will have that again at the end of my presentation, so there's no need to go note it down right now. The website is intended to be an accessible and low threshold way to access all of the tools that's also easy to share on messaging apps and social media. Next slide, please. So another tool that we developed that's available on the website are videos. The idea behind creating videos is that while the handbook is of course intended to be as low threshold as possible, you still have to download it and read all 16 chapters to get that content. So we developed 2 animated videos, all working with the same artist who illustrated the handbook. The first one is only 30 seconds long, and it provides an introduction to the handbook, explaining what it's about and how you can access it. The second video is a little bit longer, it's 2 minutes, and it takes more of a short film format, reflecting in an emotional and artistic way the themes of the handbook. Next slide, please. And the last thing on the website that I want to explain is what we have internally called the referral system. It's a list of support services that are intended to empower the user to find and seek the resources that are appropriate for them. Across 58 referral organizations, we have over 70 services, which include services in every federal state of Germany, as well as online resources. So no matter where you are in Germany, you should be able to find something that is accessible to you. You can search not only by location, but also by type of service in this referral system. And when you search by type of service, we provide definitions for what the categories are. For example, one of the categories is psychosocial counseling, but that's a word that we actually avoided in the videos and handbook because it can be overly technical and possibly stigmatized. On the other hand, many of the organizations that we refer to use that word to describe their work. So if the goal is to provide users with tools that empower them to find the support that works for them, we see providing definitions as key to doing that. Next slide, please, which I believe is the final slide. I hope you will scan the QR code here or note down the website URL to view all of these tools. And of course, feel free to contact me or our team leader, Amira Baya. We're always glad to exchange. And I just want to thank you all for your attention today and your interest in this topic. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Naomi, for sharing these interesting insights. I think it was very relevant what you shared, and also the process of developing these tools. I hand over now to Ahmed, who monitored a bit the chat. And if you have questions, please type them in the chat. Ahmed, over to you for questions.
Thank you, Andreas. First of all, thanks a lot, Noemi, for such a rich presentation. First of all, there were a lot of questions about whether the recording will be shared with people. I think Andreas has already answered that, so it will be shared. And I will target the second question to you, Noemi. Somebody is asking, can we use your manual? And before that, they're also asking, did your study find out any relationship between stress and gender-based violence? Over to you. Once you have answered that question, I'll pick up the other questions. Thanks a lot.
Our study didn't specifically find a relationship between stress and gender-based violence. I think I would then refer to other studies that were maybe broader in scope that would be better able to answer that question. But it was very clear from our conversations with women that the well-being of the men in their lives affect their own well-being in a number of ways. As for using the manual, of course, you're welcome to it. It's available on our website. We were attempting to be very specific about this manual. It is targeted towards Syrian men in Germany, but already based on feedback from, for example, Syrian women in Germany, we know that it might be applicable to others. We are also, I should mention, we see this as a pilot project, and we would love to develop similar tools for other groups.
Thanks a lot. There is another question, which is someone is asking, do you think it's the manual is suitable for teenagers as well, or would it require some sort of contextualization, some sort of modification, or is it can only be delivered to a particular age group? And after that, I think Andreas Guli has his hand up. So if you take that up, thank you.
So we didn't do any focus groups or interviews with teenagers. Everyone that we interviewed was over 18. So I'm not able to speak with on the basis of any data as to whether this is applicable to teenagers. But I do think that my own opinion is that many of the themes would be similar. But of course, if you're under 18, then you're in a very different system in Germany in terms of your legal status, the support services that are available to you. So I would keep that in mind.
Thank you, Noemi. I think we have taken 2 questions. I have noted down other questions. Please feel free. I will be feel free to put that in the chat because I will be taking it towards the end. Andreas, over to you.
Yeah, perhaps just because Guli, I see your hand is raised. Did you want to add something on the presentation?
Yeah, I wanted to probably add 2 things, because I saw some comments online that say maybe talk therapies are not the only way, to respond to these issues, and I'm very much in agreement, with that. I think there are many ways in which psychosocial support can be delivered. Talk therapies are probably not the best for many people. For instance, the integration of sport and MHPSS, is very useful, in some male context and so on. But what I wanted to say is that this booklet is actually built on the assumption that there is a certain difficulty of men to access services, either because they don't exist or because they don't want to access, because they don't think is culturally appropriate or something they should be doing. And therefore, this comes even before. So in the sense that, you read the booklet because you find it available online or, at the education center that you are attending or so on. And then after reading the book, you will have a series of possible referrals, as Noemi explained, including to creative therapies, to recreational and art-based activities and so on. So obviously that's there, but this is somewhere before, in this sense. So that's just what I wanted to clarify. Obviously, it's never a substitution for therapy. It's not therapy. It's not even also that. It's not counseling. It's just a way to make people reflect in their own spaces about these issues, and possibly with the objective then to seek for referral if needed.
Thank you very much, Guli, for this addition. For those who raised their hands, please, I would like to ask you, if you have questions, please type them in the chat because we cannot unmute all the microphones. Thanks for your understanding on this. Then we will continue with our second panelist, Sharon Rose Ataget. Sharon is a counseling psychologist and assistant MHPSS coordinator with the Jesuit Refugee Service in South Sudan. Sharon also worked with different group of men in her previous workplaces, and she will share community-based approaches to identify and engage men in MHPSS in South Sudan. So Sharon, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Maybe as you're loading the presentation, I'll just go ahead to start because my internet is very poor, so sometimes I might go off, but you bear with me. So next slide, please. So the group, the men and boys that you're working with, what you're sharing today is more or less the experience that we have working with men and boys in Maban in South Sudan. And the category of people that we work with are people who fled from Blue Nile, South Sudan, and who have been destabilized by wars and conflicts from their regions. And they have settled in South Sudan. They fled from Sudan and they're now in South Sudan. So we have in our categories, we have different people. We have the elderly, we have women, we have children, we have widows, all categories that we work with. Some are refugees and others are hosts. And for the host, there is something unique about them that they have also suffered some natural disasters, like we've had floods that have displaced them, and others have also had internal conflicts that have made them leave their comfort zones. So they have really experienced very difficult and very tough life-threatening events in their lives. So they have settled here as refugees and others as in IDPs. And so we have different cultures here, but just to be specific maybe to the men, we have really involved men in different activities. Next slide. We've involved them in very many activities as JRS. JRS has different sectors. We have the physiotherapy, where we have daycare centers, where we have boy children, we have girl children, we have sports and youth, where we have support groups where we meet young boys. Next slide, please. Where we have young boys involved in acrobats, we have young boys in music, we have young boys doing drama and other activities. So we use this opportunity to gather them and also to talk to them, to have them in sessions, though the approach is sports and youth. But that's an opportunity for us to get their attention and to also have group sessions with them. Then we also have mental health, where GRS plays a
Sharon, we can't hear you anymore. There seems to be a problem with the internet connection. So please give us a minute to try to get in contact with Sharon again. And perhaps you can use this.
Sharon, she's back, so hopefully we can hear her.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie.
Okay. Just in case I'm off, I think Katie will get on anytime. I was talking about mental health. In GRS, we have individual counseling for the youth, both individually and in groups. We have group therapy, we have support groups under mental health where we involve them and engage them. We also have education programs for teacher trainers and also English language and other education programs that work hand in hand with other organizations to support. But for this case, the boys are more involved in teacher education. We also have peace and gender-based violence, though it's mainstreamed in mental health. We have that aspect, and it has really given us success in working with the boys and the men. Moving forward to the next slide. Why we involve men? Yeah, we involve men because we believe men play a very big role in leading in the changes of attitudes and behavior in society. Men also create a mutual understanding in issues that have been neglected. There are a lot of issues that the cultures have brought forward in patriarchy societies that are not talked about. But without men, some of these things cannot be brought forward. So we need the men on board so that we are able to handle some of these issues. Then we also involve them because some of them are perpetrators of conflicts, and conflicts, of course, the effects of conflicts lead to mental health issues. The gender-based violence issues, the causes and all those effects most times actually lead to mental health issues. So we involve men because we know at times they're also perpetrators. Then we also believe that men are stewards of cultural norms in communities. They hold the virtues of cultures and they are well placed. They are decision makers. Yeah, they act as the heads of families, the heads of, much as a man might be a young person, maybe a brother or a sister, a father or an uncle. Being a man here means they hold the decisions for the families. They make decisions for the girl child. They make decisions for the wives, the mothers, and others. Men are also placed in very influential capacities. You'll find in most communities like Maban, they are religious leaders, they are cultural leaders, they are the opinion leaders, they are government officials. So we feel that involving men is key in the fight against gender-based violence, but also in inclusion of mental health and psychosocial support. We cannot work with the women alone without the men. Our men are also responsible for promoting and rewarding and even punishing the people who go against the cultural beliefs. For example, if a girl in Maban, where girls are booked in a very tender age, at about 10 years, a family of the boy has a right to come and book a girl and start paying dowry. So in a case like that, if maybe a girl has grown up and she's not willing to go with her husband, it's the men who come up and stand against the girl's decision. So if we involve these men and talk to them and help them understand that maybe their actions are against the rights of the children, then we have them on board. They will act as the people who will be able to help us change the attitudes and behaviors and beliefs of their cultures. Then men are also victims. In one of the groups, as we shall see ahead, some of the men share stories of how they are tortured, how they are battered by their wives. So they are sometimes victims. They are beaten. They also face conflicts. They are raped, some of them, and so we cannot do without them. So that's why we involve men in our work in mental health. That's why we need them. Next slide. So how have we approached, how are we doing it as JRS? We do a lot of trainings for community leaders who are obviously men, most of them. So we do a lot of trainings, we do campaigns, we bring the men together, train them and help them understand the gender roles. We help them understand mental health so that they are able to take their voices to other people, their families, their communities, their groups.
I think we again have issues with the connection to South Sudan. So let's wait for a few more seconds again and hope that Sharon will be with us.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
hi, Sharon. There you are again.
Okay. Hi, I'm back. So I was talking about trainings where we train local leaders, we train opinion leaders, we get religious leaders and get them together, train them, and they help us act as ambassadors to share the messages that they have understood from the training about gender-based violence and also about mental health. So they share these messages to other people, and this helps us is in the work. We also raise awareness to different groups where we have all communities, both men and female, just to explain to them ideas on mental health, how they are able to identify people with mental illnesses and how they're able to take care of them, but also identify some of the gender-based violence issues that are surrounding in their communities so that they're able to refer them for further assistance. We also conduct trainings for partner organizations around so that they're able to help us identify the people who are in need of mental health in their organizations or in the communities that they work in. Next slide. So, this is how we identify the men.
Sharon, we again have a problem with connectivity.
So it looks like she actually went off this time. Usually it's just going in and out. And I just want to thank everyone for bearing with us, because obviously the challenges of working in some really difficult or remote places are the infrastructure. But I can pick up on this slide. I can't do it the justice that Sharon will, but hopefully she can add anything I missed when she's able to connect.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, so just let me know if you see her pop. Oh, she's popped back on, but I'll just go ahead and start with this while she's connecting. As she mentioned, when the team is doing work with community leaders and doing trainings with community leaders, they're able to help identify and through camp management, anyone who might need additional support or could be referred to JRS. Sharon, can you hear me now? Are you able to jump on? Looks like she's still connecting. Okay, great. I just went through your first bullet point.
I'll just turn off the video so that maybe my internet is a bit stable. Yeah, so I was talking about identification of participants. So we use the camp management in our communities where we work, especially the refugee settlements, the camp settlements. We have camp management. We have the sheikhs, the umdas, the representatives of different categories like the youth, the opinion leaders, the women representatives, who help us identify the men and the boys that we work with in our support groups. We also use the community leaders who we have trained, yeah, and also some who already are aware through our campaigns, who are aware of the services that we offer as JRS, so they come in and help us. We also do a lot of community awareness, so this helps them understand and know how to refer the cases, all the boys, all the men that they feel need our services. Then we also have peer support groups from the people who have graduated from our groups, our support groups.
Okay, there seems to be again a problem. Katie, may I ask you to continue and yeah, let's see.
Absolutely. So another way we work with them is through trained incentive, or our recruit is through the trained incentive workers in all settlements. So the majority of the team in Mabon is refugee staff themselves or members from the host community, so the community that we're working with. And so they're able to identify and bring people into JRS and provide that support themselves. We also work very closely with partner organizations in Mabon to be able to identify any other participants. And then we have the self-referral mechanism. So through community awareness raising, through word of mouth, through the community leaders that are trained in mental health and psychosocial support considerations, that influences the community and they can refer themselves. So our compound has kind of like an open door policy as well. So anyone can walk in or they can identify us because we have certain spaces throughout each of the 5 camp areas in Mabon. We can go to the next slide. So Sharon is back on, but I'll take this on until she connects with her audio. But some of the ways that they've engaged men so is through support groups. So Sharon, do you want to kick it off with men support groups? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, the main support groups that have graduated. Okay, so we also have the acrobat youth men as the youth groups that we work with. I talked about them earlier on, but these are some of the groups that have already graduated. So some of them share their messages to others and help us identify them. Next slide. Then we also have the trained incentive workers who we work with. I think you went a bit ahead. Back again. Yes, so we also have trained incentive workers who work within all settlements. Then we have partner organizations that we work with. I talked about that. Then we have self-referrals. We have clients who come, who walk into our youth centers. We have different youth centers in some settlements. So they come in and ask for some of the services, or they ask to be part of the men's group because they have heard about the successes of these groups. The next slide. So this helps us form easily the support groups. Then these are some of the things that the groups that I had talked about already, the men support groups. We have men support group, we have the youth support group, we have the sports, the youth support groups who are part of the sports, who are in volleyball, football, acrobats. There are different support groups that we work with. So each of these have a different curriculum that we take them through, but in all, we discuss about gender-based violence, the need for mental health, stress, among others. Next. So one of the cases that I wanted to share is about one of the men who shared his story after we had discussed about gender-based violence and the changing gender roles. So he shared that when he learned from what we had shared, we had talked about how important it is to share and to support our wives or our partners in doing house chores and doing any other errand at home, because we are both we are equally responsible for these roles. He went back home and he participated in the cooking that time, and it looked different, and he told us in the group this was the first time he felt very important as a man, and he shared that it's one thing that made his children, I think, have a different opinion of him, and he really appreciated the efforts of the group. And he actually came back and told the other men, if you have not tried to do this, please take an example from me. This was really nice. Then the other was we're talking about teenagers getting married at a tender age, and we're talking about how well we can help our children not get married early. So one of the men in the next session shared how he paid off a man who had booked his 10-year-old sister to be married off to another man. So he said he felt touched from our discussions of gender-based violence. He felt that he was being unfair to his sister. So he decided to pay off the other family so that he redeems his sister from getting married young. So to us, these were really, really very encouraging. So those are some of the key stories that I wanted to share with you, among many others that we have experienced in our work with the men. The next slide. So some of the achievements that we've had. One, we have seen men very proactive now. They are doing the awareness. They've moved out to their communities because they have understood what gender-based violence is. They've understood the need for mental health. They have moved out to communities. They are talking against the bad practices that we call child marriages and other.
Sharon, we can't hear you anymore. But I guess it's then again the connection. So Katie, if you want to continue.
Yeah, sorry again about the connection. But yeah, so achievements in engaging men have been through the creation in the community against awareness in the community against some of the bad practices of SGBV. So the examples that Sharon mentioned around early child marriage, et cetera. Men have also taken this more opportunity to defend girls. So again, using the example of the girl child in the family, facilitating respect from the family. Another example of this is the case story that Sharon shared about the husband cooking for his wife when she was ill, and through pre and post measures that they take through the support groups, they've also noticed an 80% change in behavioral attitudes and practices around bad practices for SGBV. And then they've also seen an increased access to MHPSS services for and by men. So through the awareness raising, through the training with the community members, they've seen a huge increase in the access of these support groups. And one of the things that I find really interesting and as an antidote for success is that, and Sharon mentioned this, but the members of previous support groups are actually the ones that identify new members and recruit new members for the next support groups. So we can go to the next slide. So Sharon, I picked up where you left off and we're on the successes continued. I think we need to try to move quickly through these also just because we have only a little bit more time left.
Okay, maybe I'll just go to the opinion leaders who have also taken up, because some of the group, actually some of the members in our support groups as actually group leaders, some are opinion leaders, so some of them actually took up the role to like encourage other members to join the group and also let parents talk about education. They are the ones taking the lead in creating awareness in the communities about the need for education. And this at least has helped us see an increased number of children attending school, both the married and the married children. Those who married young are also joining school because they see the need. And this has also helped us decrease some of the cultural practices like forced marriages, child marriages, and others. Next slide. So we've really seen a big success, much as it has had some challenges that we shall talk about at the end. Maybe let me just talk about 2 challenges before I look at the way forward. We've also had a few challenges, of course, while working with the men. And one of them is early responsibilities. The boys marry young, so it creates a big burden to them to start taking care of the children. They are not able to work. The changes of gender roles from their communities to a new place where there is no more digging. Some of them are farmers from their countries of origin. They've come to a new place. They are not able to dig because of the nature of environment here. So it becomes a bit difficult. And there is also sometimes difficult in mobilization. Sometimes the group leaders bring them together, and sometimes they have expectations that are beyond the organization that they are not able to sustain. So sometimes it becomes difficult, like because of unemployment, most of the youth have demands or expectations of having certificates. Yeah, so sometimes it's hard. So I'll just jump to the way forward because of time. We need more trainings to be done for the community workers and also other partner organizations. We also have to do a lot of awareness raising through ICE materials, then more research to fully understand the complexities in dealing with men. Next slide. So in conclusion, for us to succeed or to really get a lot of achievements in the fight against gender-based violence and in the inclusion of mental health. We need men. We need men to participate because they are key in all this. They are key in gender-based violence. They are key in mental health. And they participate in the healing processes. They also participate. If we leave them out, then they'll be the ones that will perpetrate the acts. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for the interesting presentation and sharing your experiences with the project in South Sudan. I'm sure there are many questions. Regarding time, I suggest perhaps, Ahmed, if you can focus on one or two of the most relevant questions. And then we hope to have a bit more time after the third presentation to perhaps come back to these questions.
Yes, thank you, Andreas. Indeed, there are quite a lot of questions. People are very engaged in this discussion. First of all, they're also congratulating our South Sudan colleagues for their amazing work. One question that has been coming up again and again is people are asking, how did you measure the behavioral change to be 80% change? If anyone has any thought on that? What tools did you use? What criteria did you consider? Please, Katie and Sharon, feel free to share your thoughts on that.
Well, from the clientele that we have as GRS, we have tools that we use for assessment, the pre and post tools that we use in our sessions. So out of the clientele that we have, that the number of people that we've engaged in, we also work with other partners to see the progress. For example, I mentioned that we have education here. So we are able to relate with other sectors, but to be specific to the 80% increase in behavioral change is mainly in our support groups. We hear from what they say, and also the tools that we use as pre and post. When we are enrolling them, we assess them. Then at the end of the sessions, we also assess them to see the impact.
So 80% of the participants from our group had changed their behaviors around certain practices as they had agreed in the pre-test and then compared to the post-test.
Yes.
Thank you. I hope that answers the question. If you need what tools people need, feel free to reach out to Andreas and our other colleagues, and I'm sure everyone will be very happy to share the tools with you as well. Over to you, Andreas. There are a lot of questions, so we really need to take care of them because they're very interesting questions, and I would love them to be answered by our amazing panelists. So over to you.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you very much again, Sharon. We move on to the third presentation to Yevgenia Yurchuk from IOM Ukraine, and we'll see to have a bit more time in the end, hopefully, to discuss further questions that you shared in the chat. So thanks a lot, and a warm welcome now also to Yevgenia, who will share the process of awareness campaign addressing mainly or specifically men and boys in Ukraine. Yevgenia, welcome. And please
thank you very much. Thank you very much. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, as all of us from different parts of the world, and it's extremely pleased to have all of you here today. So we can just move to the next slide, please. So we'll start from the brief information about the context in the country. So just to give a general understanding, so why in general we started to do MHPSS activities and why we focused on the men and boys. So Ukraine on its 8th year of the conflict, ongoing ones, some of them consider it as a freezing for a certain period of time. So it's happening in the east part of the country, in Donetsk and Lugansk regions in particular. So basically, the Donetsk and Lugansk region are divided by the line of contact. So we have governmental control areas and non-government control areas. So according to the OCHA and to their humanitarian needs overview for this year, there's more than 3 million of people who are in need. And according to the protection cluster, 2.2 million of people residing in the east part of the country are in need of the protection assistance. And in case of Ukraine, MHPSS falls under the protection type under the protection cluster. So besides the activities, the conflict happening in the east caused their that we started having internal displaced persons, something that Ukraine was not ready before the 2014 years. So as of today, according to the Ministry of Social Policy, we have 1.4 million of IDPs, but we are talking about officially registered, so the number is higher. And those people are residing, again, mainly in their east part of the country. So, and to the nearest regions to the Donetsk and Lugansk. It's Kharkov, Zaporizhia, and Dnipropetrovsk region. So that's why there's no wonder that we actually focus all our interventions as emergency stabilization unit in this part of the country, but take into consideration those who are living in other regions of Ukraine. But this particular campaign that we were doing, so it was targeting 5 regions in particular. Of course, with the COVID-19 outbreak, everything what was already was unfortunately was not unstable due to the conflict, and of course people face difficulties, and especially regarding the MHPSS due to their shellings and ongoing activities. So COVID-19 makes things worse, unfortunately. So can we move to the next slide, please? So in 2020, in September, almost a year ago, we decided, again, because of the situation that happened to us, so we could not reach our beneficiaries anymore with the help of online activities. We have to move and to be creative as much as possible and to shift to the online and using the mobile tools and online tools. So that's why we introduced their I am MHPSS hotline, so where we have 12 MHPSS workers. 4 of them are operators who are receiving the calls from the people, registering them and providing the first support, or for example, if there are suicide cases, so they're answering and helping those people during these calls. Then they may refer those people again upon the need and the first screening to 6 psychologists. Then at a certain point, we understood that we need a psychiatrist. So we have 1 psychiatrist on board, and we have 1 supervisor because our MHPSS workers do need support as well from a site. So here, basically, the lessons learned that I wanted to just really share and close to their today's topic, that in general, their situation in Ukraine is such that the vast majority of social workers, MHPSS workers, are women, but not men. And what we actually heard from our beneficiaries that those are male, that they are willing just to talk sometimes only with male because they want to discuss some kind of sensitive topics. So for us, it was crucial that we had this 50-50% in our hotline. So we have their male MHPSS workers and female MHPSS workers. So just to make our beneficiaries comfortable as much as possible in this. So it was a challenge to find MHPSS male workers in Ukraine, but we managed to do that. And moreover, it's something for us to work further on and to proceed with the capacity building activities and just change their gender statistics among the MHPSS workers. So please, the next slide. So before the one information campaign that we conducted purely focused on the men and boys. So we had, after we launched the hotline, we launched the awareness campaign. That was more purely COVID-19 related. So actually it was, again, for us, it was important just to voice up about ourselves and just tell people that there is a hotline and you may reach this hotline if you're staying at home or and you want to talk. So the campaign called just wear a mask but don't mask your feelings. So we really played a lot with the word of mask, and we really had we had this as you can see on the photo, a huge mask with all the problems mentioned on this mask, and the fears that people face with during the COVID-19 time. So this was for us the first time experience about organize such type of awareness campaign. So the lots of lessons learned we actually already used in our second one that purely related to their men and boys. So, and here basically this was, next slide please. So this was for the first time where we actually, after the 3 months of the function, like when hotline was functioning, so we could go through the statistics because honestly, like, because our hotline is confidential, so the only data we are gathering is just like who's calling, male, female, or someone else. So we actually can somehow just to analyze the data we are receiving and just to make their more our tailored activities. So we found out that basically like the share of men reaching our hotline or calling is like extremely low. So it was like something more around like 20%. It was the highest one because like we were gathering this information on a monthly basis. So then we become curious. So why it's happening so? And of course it's like totally a new topic for us. So we are starting just to go through the focus group discussions and through the rapid surveys among all the people that we could reach and we could engage. So please, next slide. We actually conducted several focus groups. So it was like focus groups was men only. Then we of course have like their focus group was female only. Then we have a focus group with MHPSS workers. We engaged our field staff working in the targeted areas. So because they are like in constant contact with the beneficiaries and they are living in that area, so they can provide us like very much hints and information from the ground. Then we had like focus group discussion with the local MHPSS workers just to see and just to hear their opinion, like what they hear from the people on the ground, why people are actually just, especially men, so like not willing just to call to the hotline. So what is standing behind? So next slide, please. So the main problem that we actually heard, and it's not like a wonder, and it's already was mentioned today, during like our call in the beginning and in the previous presentations, that men feel ashamed to seek for help because like male considered to be as strong. So, or for example, because of their people are living in the small towns, and for example, if someone will see him or like her calling just or reaching the MHPSS workers, there's going to be like lots of rumors in the area and people will spread this information. So they didn't feel that it's really confidential, so they really can be honest talking about their problems. And the third one, they do not know, they do not seek for help because they don't simply know where to find this help. So they were not aware about the hotline existing or about MHPSS workers on the ground that can provide such support. So we really tried to help, like to play with the word strong, because this is something like what we heard really a lot, that because of like this is stigmatization probably of male, that they only can be strong and do not show any emotions. So we wanted just to make the word like in a positive way and just from like kind of a messages or basically a structure of our campaign, just using the word strong as they are strong enough just to speak openly. So the man must be able to share his emotions and to be brave to contact their hotline. So we wanted just to use this word in a different context, but something that will basically encourage men just to reach the hotline. Next slide, please. So basically during the focus group discussion, so that was like the thing that like highly recommended just to like to be conducted in case if you want to do any kind of MHPSS type of activities, whether it's going to be like awareness raising campaign or something else. So because this is like a super informative tool and basically engaging the community members into just creating of something big and something for them. So it really makes the product totally different in the end. So from the beginning, what we wanted, we wanted our implementing partner just to be present during this focus group discussion, because for us it was important not for us only just to understand what are the needs or what were the problems and what conditions should be provided just for male just to reach the MHPSS workers, either it's hotline or any other ways. So we wanted the partner who was responsible for all this production and visualization to be a part of it. So we were honest with our members of the focus group discussion, and we presented that basically here we have IM workers and here we have the implementing partner workers. So we actually explained them and was very honest while we are all here today that we are not really knowing very well this topic, and we really need their help and support, and we need their feedback. Like, it's something like was stressed so many times during the focus group discussion and afterwards. So the focus group discussions were structured in two ways. So on the first part of the focus group discussion, we were asking just like prepared questions, the same for every single focus group discussion about what is MHPSS for them, how is actually MHPSS in their area, what is the problem they faced with, and for example, whose advice they are looking for example, in their hardest and darkness period of their time. And the second part of the focus group discussions were basically where we presented them the visuals, because we have something already developed so far based on kind of our understanding and our experience. But we wanted just to share with them 3 different concepts and ideas, and we let them to heavily criticize us. So just we really wanted them to tell us what they like about posters. Do they like video scripts? Do they like how the billboard is signed? Do they like in general the idea? So, and it was like very, very nice because it was like very creative part of the work, because like people were like starting like to not only just telling what is wrong with like the materials that we prepared. So they are like started like to share kind of ideas about how we can make it better. So, and of course it worked super great because, for example, one of the posters that we have developed, one of the concept of ideas, like what's the feedback we've heard, that is look like something like used by the politician during the election process. So for us, it was like super important just to hear that, because we don't want just to be very politicized, and definitely this is not the goal. Another feedback that we received, that there are so many troubles and everything is so great, gray outside. So that's why the campaign should be positive, colorful, and yes, we are talking about the problems, but there should be some kind of happy end, so-called, in the end. So just not just to tell that everything is bad. If you feel bad, just like do something, just talk to someone. So people want like clear actions and they want to see the results. Another great idea that we've heard, it basically was something just mentioned by their female focus group discussions. So when they just having a look on the poster or as an advertisement, they want to have a wish to recommend his father, her father, brother, kid, or spouse, just to reach it. So that's why we, at this particular point, we understood that to create their campaign for men without women is really impossible, because they are the main drivers. So they are the one who are like will advise. They will be the first who will hear that or notice that something is going wrong, so they can basically just at least just start the first talk and the first conversation. And then it was actually confirmed during our during another focus group discussion with men purely. So they told that, for example, they do not feel comfortable just to read the contact for hotline like directly by themselves, but if his wife would recommend him, he would definitely do that. So we really just mentioned that basically it's all goes like together. So like we all have just to be like together in this process and just really take care of each other. So another thing that I would like to mention, that people were talking a lot about their friends. For example, those who are like do not have like spouses. So they of course rely on friends heavily. So, and again, there was like kind of a message, and so if the friend would mention him, just please seek for the support, or please call this hotline or go to the MHPSS workers. So like our members of the focus group discussion told that at least they would give a try. So next slide, please. Thank you. So as I am a mini person, so definitely another tip from my side, like please engage MNE people, like MNE members. So they are basically the people who can help you to conduct all the focus group discussion, all the surveys, lead the process, and they are the one who are gathering data on the ground and analyzing it. So they will definitely have some kind of lesson learned start. So please do engage them. So because they really can just have a totally another understanding and probably the overall vision of their situation, so but not like from the project implementation side. So that's why, I mean, their team who is working on the product should be diverse as possible. So just feel free to engage like all of their like members of the team, whether it's finance unit or procurement unit, just let them be a part of it, because like people always like to be as a part of something huge. So we are not talking only about engaging the beneficiaries, but engage your own colleagues. So it always worked greatly. Another, but and not the last but not least tip is when we started developing the information campaign during the focus group discussion and rapid surveys, of course, we asked them the question about how they gain the information. So what tools they are using it. And of course, people of different age use different like communication means. They use like different like tools, how they find out about that information. Of course, no wonder that people aged over 60, they are more like rely on the information that received from the national media. But when we are talking about the like teenagers and young adults, of course, it's like social media, the first source, and like YouTube, like something like where they wanted just to find out about certain services or certain information and they trust it. So that's why, like, when we started to develop the different products within information campaign, so we have to have all of that. So we had their advertisement on the YouTube channel. So we had social advertisement on the national and local media, in newspapers, in the social media, in posters, billboards, and we use different means of the transport. So we have advertisement in the trains, we have advertisement in the subways, like buses, just kind of really everywhere. So we really ask beneficiaries to tell us, just to share their kind of movement, how they spend the day, where they go. And another one, what we find out that, of course, people spend a lot of time in the coffee shops and beauty salons, whether it's men or women, doesn't matter. So then after that, we decided to disseminate information about our MHPSS, like materials of our MHPSS information campaigns within these key sites for our beneficiaries. So next slide, please. So actually, we came up with their motto of the campaign, that it was called like, start talking, it will be easier. So again, it was based on what we've heard from the beneficiaries. So they want to see the problem, action, and the result of the action. So for example, problem, I lost a job. So action, I called the hotline because I need to talk, I need to support, I need just to express my emotions, or like I feel fear, I have sleepless nights, and so on. And the results, so because like of their talks or the series of the consultations and so on, it becomes easier. So it was for us very important just to find especially this word, because we didn't want just to give a promise for the people that everything is going to be bright, the world will be different, so tomorrow you will get up and everything will be like changed and very positive. So we wanted just really to show that maybe in certain way it will be easier, at least you will start to talk, so it will make a change. So, but not really promise too much, because we do understand that each and every person has its own problems and like go through all of his problems in his or her different way. Next slide, please. So basically, this is like the poster that we came up with as a result of all of those focus group discussion and rapid surveys. Again, it was like very nice just to see, because again, it was something that was not like created for us, assuming what beneficiaries would like. So that was totally different, because beneficiaries were really a part of it, and they really could tell us how to place, what colors to use, and whom to place. So the Donetsk and Lugansk region are very well known as a center of the coal industry of Ukraine, and it's like something like very particular to this region. So we wanted really just to make this link and just to tell people that is like we are thinking about them. So, and we are taking the peculiarities of the area where they reside in. So that's why we have like 3 different types of the posters, but we know from the start for sure that we for sure have to have on the poster the mind worker, just to make this connection with that regions of the country. And another thing is what is happening this, like because of the news, because of the closure of the mines, so lots of miners are losing their job. So no wonder the problem that we had there, it's basically that our character that is like placed on their poster, he lost his job, and this is like the main issue. So with this message, we actually, again, we have like a step forward to our beneficiaries. So we are like we mentioned that we know about their problems, because again, we do know about their problems thanks to them, because they shared with us openly with that. And another problem that again, that is what happened due to the COVID-19, that basically people of their pre-pension age, so around 50 years and plus years old, the vast majority of them lost their jobs. So again, for us, it was important just the age of this character. So just to make sure that we do understand what's happening in the country. So, and we do know our beneficiaries, not very well, but at least better with the help of this discussions. Then we had a message that our character called to a psychologist because he couldn't deal with stress. And as a result, it became easier in sort of way for him. And then we, of course, mentioning our hotline, mentioning that it's free of charge and it's confidential, because again, it was something what we've heard from our beneficiaries, that they would call to the hotline if they would for 100% sure that it's confidential, and it will be not just information will not be shared. So this word confidential here is a very strong word, because again, this is the way how to convince them to make this first step and just to give a call to the hotline. Next slide, please.
Yevgenia, I just have to say we need to come to an end soon. So you have a few more minutes, but not too many anymore.
Yes, sorry, I will be super fast. So this is basically the 3 posters that we developed. So again, what characters to place we were seeking from the beneficiary side. So this is they mentioning to us whom they want to be placed there. So next slide, please. So another thing that we did, we made a video that is social advertisement. So Andreas, do you want to we will watch it, or for example, because of the lack of the time, we will just share the link and people will attendees will watch it later.
Perhaps we can watch it because it's a nice example.
Okay, great. So let's watch the video and then talk about it.
Пам'ятаю той період. Бувало, прокидався і заснути не міг пару ночей підряд. Страшно було. А чого зрозуміти не міг. Коли вона пішла, було дуже важко. Я ні з ким про це не говорив. Зі мною такого раніше не траплялося. Це вже зараз я розумію, що в нас тут якось не прийнято взагалі звертати на таке увагу. З ким не буває, здавалося б. Всяке трапляється, таке життя. Потім зібрався і зателефонував, переборов себе. Ну і нормально, поговорили, жити буду. Говорить про те, що в тебе в голові, важливо і нормально. Саме велика сміливість – це бути відвертим із собою і не боятися говорити з іншими. Легше стало.
Почни говорити, стане легше. Звернись до психолога на анонімну гарячу лінію 0800 211 444.
Thank you very much. So just like one tiny comment on the video. So basically another, like what we found out from our focus group discussion and talks with the beneficiaries, that basically it's words for men and women both, but for example, their loss of the beloved ones is their one of the difficulties in the life that is like super hard like to manage for every single person. So that's why this video we wanted just to focus on this problem. And the main character is telling about that he lost her. Again, it can be mother or wife or, for example, daughter, because again, we wanted just to be closer to our beneficiaries, and because like they shared with us was such information. So we really wanted just to include it and just to show them that we really like hearing them and just preparing their things for them. So next slide, please. So, and in the end, we actually, the last activity that we had as a part of our information campaign was a public event where we have 6-meter high Jenga tower. So Jenga represented about how unstable a person can be if you go in like piece by piece, and just sooner or later you will fall down, because if you will hide your problems, I will not share with it. So it was blue colored blocks. There was a list of different kind of phrases that people usually say that, okay, I'm like simply tired, so it's not a problem, it's just the weather or something like this. But when their Jenga fall down, so we had the red colored pieces, so where there was like the real problems were hitting. And again, this was the way about just to mention like people that, okay, this is like just to demonstrate about how like the person can collapse one day if you will not be like strong enough to share your problems with the people with whom you trust. And next slide, please. So, and of course we had motivation speaker. So we really wanted just to use in certain way what was happening and what was discussed during the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games about where the sportsmen for the first time, probably not probably for the first time, but they were so were brave enough just to tell about the mental health, and it was started by Simona Biles and was supported by other sportsmen. So we decided just to invite to this public event sportsmen and let them just to talk about their problems and just to share, for example, maybe some kind of tips with the beneficiaries about how they can cope with the activities. So here you have in the photo like Stanislav Medvedenko. He is the former NBA basketball player. And because of injuries, he had to stop his career and he had to return from the United States back to Ukraine. And basically, he really was like openly shared his story and advices about what actually each of us can do in order just to feel a bit better. So, and the last slide, please. So on the chart, whereas like the assistance provided through this hotline, the first one, so you can see that because our campaign was conducted in August, September, the number of calls increased enormously. So because like we had around like 1,000 calls, and after the campaign, the number of the calls was basically even like more than doubled. So, and we 70% of the calls were from men. So we were like considered this like a huge achievement of ours, but this is like there was like there's also work to be done in future, but this is our first steps. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Evgenia, for sharing this interesting media campaign and the approach you used to address men's psychosocial needs and to share information about existing support structures. Regarding time, I hope our participants might stay a few more minutes so we can perhaps address one question from Ahmed and then share some information with you at the end of the webinar. And thanks a lot for your understanding. Ahmed, please.
Thank you, Andreas. There are a lot of unanswered questions, and I think we have to find a way to somehow answer them. But there's one question that I will address. I will kind of channelize towards Katie and Guli. Somebody asked, actually a few people asked, are there any IASC guidelines in engaging with men and boys on MHPSS? And I think I will let Katie answer that. But my suggestion is what Katie is going to introduce is a newsletter by us, maybe we can find a way to incorporate a section where we can answer these unanswered questions there. I'll let Katie and Guli take over. Thank you.
So I think the short answer to that question is no, not yet. But that is why we have this working group. And as Guli mentioned, this is something that he has been really spearheading for a long time. And as a result of this, we realize we have a lot more to learn from our colleagues that are doing this work, but do eventually hope to develop through this working group a guidance note, taking your examples and understanding best practices and sharing them out. Guli, did you want to add to that?
I don't have much to add. If not that, yes, probably, you know, it's more a question to everyone in the chat, you know, if you think that there should be a need for some guidance, you know, and maybe a possibility for some guidance. Because also it's quite difficult, you know, as a team, in the sense that, you know, inclusion cut across many different applications of psychosocial support. But then, you know, maybe it's more a question, so we'll also check if there is still someone online, you know, and in the wake. That is, so there is a need. Maybe you can raise your hand. If you think that there is a need for it, you can raise your hand, so we can have a direct vision of that.
Yeah, just do online voting. Just say yes in the chat and we'll take
exactly.
it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And maybe in addition to that, like, we're having I'll pass this over to Molly while people write their feedback. We see a lot of yeses already in the chat. Molly, can you tell us what's going to come next from this working group after this webinar?
Sure. So the Men and Boys Working Group will be launching a newsletter this week that's going to be shared periodically. These newsletters will contain new and relevant resources, as well as upcoming events and trainings on MHPSS for men and boys in humanitarian settings and displacement. So for example, next time a webinar is hosted by this working group, the information will be shared ahead of time in the newsletter. These newsletters will also create an opportunity for recipients to share and disseminate new resources and tools with the rest of the members. Subscription to this newsletter is free and can be terminated at any time. As an attendee of today's webinar, you will be automatically subscribed. So be on the lookout for the first one in your inboxes this week. And I think we will probably include a section in this newsletter that will answer any of the unanswered questions from today's webinar. I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Molly, for giving this update and share this important information. So yeah, we hope you are interested in receiving this newsletter. We will also make sure that organizations and individuals who want to share upcoming events on the topic or share documents they develop can reach out to us. So we want this to be really a channel to communicate among those working on this topic. Having said this, and we have overstretched time for a couple of minutes already, I guess we have to come to an end, unfortunately, but as Molly mentioned, we will try to address the unreplied questions, and we'll share the replies of our panelists with you. And we'll also share the recording of the session and the presentations with you, including all the web links to the videos and documents. Having said that, I think the last to do is to again say a big thank you to our three panelists, to Guli for the introduction speech, and to all working group members who helped to make this event happen. And thanks for your participation also, and for sharing your questions. We hope we can stay in contact on this important topic and be in exchange on this further. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.